Good evening, everyone. We are here tonight to talk a little bit about removing federal student loans from default. We're also going to talk a little bit about how to avoid default if loans are already in default. Just as a beginning to introducing this program, I'm going to talk a little bit about Volunteer Lawyers Project, which is the organization that I work for. My name is Pauline Smith. I'm a program manager for the Economic Opportunities Program at VLP. We are also a provider of something called EdCap services, which are Educational Debt Consumer Assistance Services provided by the state of New York for people who are experiencing difficulty with their student loans. EdCap services are free for anyone of any income level and are available to help you figure out either your best student loan repayment strategy, whether you're eligible for loan forgiveness, loan cancellation. We can help you apply for consolidation. We can help you resolve issues with loan servicers and lenders. And we can also help you get out of default. And that will help you avoid wage garnishment, Social Security offsets, and tax intercepts, all the things that happen once a student loan is defaulted. So we are here to be your provider of student loan services and assistance in the event that you are having a difficulty with a student loan. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be in delinquency and what does it mean to be in default with federal student loans. We're going to specifically speak only tonight about federal student loans. And delinquency and default with student loans are different than they are with other kinds of debt, like your credit card debts or anything like that. When we speak of delinquency when it comes to a federal student loan, delinquency starts the day after the borrower misses a payment. So the payment is due September 1st. September 2nd, the loan enters into delinquency. Your servicer can charge late fees. Eventually, it can negatively affect your borrower's credit score. Usually, that's only after 90 days that those delinquencies are reported to credit reporting agencies. During that delinquency period, the borrower can still access deferments, forbearances. They can change their repayment plan to try to cure the delinquency. So there are lots of different strategies available to a borrower when they are in delinquency in order to bring that loan current. However, once the loan goes 270 days past due, the loan removes from delinquency and goes into default. Default is a very different animal because there are not as many available resources to bring that loan current again. The borrower is no longer eligible for deferment. They can't get forbearances. They can't change their repayment plan. Their wages can be garnished at that point. They can be sued for the balance of the loans. But the thing that you have to remember is that tax refunds and wages can be garnished without having to get that judgment against you because it is a debt that is owed to the federal government. It is different than if it's a debt that's owed to like a credit card company or anything like that. As well, some borrowers in some states can lose their professional licenses for having defaulted on a student loan. New York is not one of those states, but there are 13 states in the United States where people are doctors, nurses, teachers, if they default upon their student loans, they can actually lose their professional licensing. There are some moves to go ahead and remove that part of the default process, but unfortunately, it is still something that is occurring in 13 states around the country. So you might think to yourself, what can I do if I am in default? How can I avoid, or if I'm in delinquency, how do I avoid going into default? And this is your best point at which you can avoid a problem. You can avoid default by doing a few things that are actually a lot easier than going into default. The first strategy that you can do is you can actually put your loan into deferment or forbearance. And deferment or forbearance is available to most people who are in a number of different circumstances. There are deferments that are available, for being in school, for having financial difficulties, and there are forbearance that are available to most people that you can take upon request. And depending on the kind of loan will determine how long you have within those periods um, to be able to take during the life of your loan. There's consolidation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a while. You can also explore more affordable repayment plans. There are a few different kinds of repayment plans that are available on federal student loans, and you can explore whether one of those might be a lower payment for you at this time, and that would help you to avoid going into default. You can also apply for loan forgiveness. And so there are some programs that allow loan forgiveness, and those are something that not a lot of people think about once they are in the delinquency period, but it might be something you can avail yourself of, and that would help you cure that delinquency so that you don't go into default. So the first strategy is deferment or forbearance. Well, what does that mean? There's a difference between deferment and forbearance. I know some people use them interchangeably, but there is actually quite a difference. In a deferment, this delays your payments through an application for people who are in school, who are unemployed, they're doing military service, they're experiencing economic hardship. These are interest-free for subsidized loans. Unsubsidized loans continue to accrue interest and everything, and interest capitalizes once the deferment ends. But subsidized loans do not incur interest during that period. Forbearances are usually due to financial difficulties. There can be some medical expenses, public services, employment. During those periods, interest continues to accrue, except for some special administrative forbearances during the COVID, and interest does not capitalize upon leaving a forbearance. Usually for most federal loans, you have a period of forbearance that is 36 months and a period of deferment that really depends on your circumstances, but forbearances are usually limited to 36 months. But you can take those kind of more on a as needed basis versus the deferment, which you have to qualify for. But they are limited over the course of the life of the loan. And either one of these strategies can allow you to, if you're 3 months behind, you can actually apply a deferment or a forbearance to that period that you're behind, which would bring you current if you have those remedies available to you. You can also do a consolidation. Consolidation is actually taking a whole bunch of different loans and putting them into a new loan. So it basically closes out and pays off the previous loans, thereby removing them from delinquency, and puts them all into one brand new loan. There are some benefits to that. It gives the borrower one single loan, one monthly bill, and it can lower the monthly payment by giving you a longer period to repay your loans. It also gives you some other options for income-driven repayment plans and PSLF if you consolidate loans other than direct loans, like FFEL loans or other loans consolidated with direct loans will give you the opportunity to take advantage of those different income-driven repayment plans. You can also switch to any variable rate loans to a fixed rate loan. So those are the upsides of consolidation. There are a few more downsides to consolidation, which we can talk a little bit more. If you're already in PSLF, you might lose some credit towards some of those PSLF periods because they take weighted averages of the time that you have been paying on those things. You can lose a little bit of time towards income-driven repayment based upon those weighted averages. However, if you're already in delinquency, this is a great option because you're in delinquency. So it will help you move past that delinquency period. All right, so then there are some options. You can explore more affordable repayment plans. And you might think, well, what does that mean? Well, right now, in the current environment, traditional repayment plans really mean that you pay over 10 years for your loan, and it's usually for the standard, it's 10 years. You can be on an extended or a graduated repayment program, and some of those are for people who have larger balances, who graduated during certain specific times. They get a longer period of time. But let's say you're on a standard 10-year repayment plan. Well, what that means is that you can um, go ahead and get those higher payments, those higher monthly payment plans, but you would get the same payment plan every month for 10 years, and then your loans would be gone. Um, Now, for income driven repayment plans, you actually will usually annually certify your income, and that will then reflect in a change in the amount that you'll owe year to year. So let's say one year you make a high income, the next year your payments might go up. But let's say then at the end of that year you lose your job, or you take a pay cut, and then your payments for the following year would go down. So really your payments during that period are entirely dependent upon your income, your family size, and things like that. Um, After 10 to 25 years of payments, you could be eligible for loan forgiveness under that income driven repayment plan. It also would allow you to make adjustments to your payments when your income changes. It's really well suited for people with high debt balances and low to moderate income. Or if you're pursuing PSLF or anything like that, you absolutely need to be in an income driven repayment plan to take advantage of that. Um, right now, unfortunately, the SAVE plan, which was going to be kind of the 5% of discretionary income plan, is no longer available because of some litigation involved with that. So right now, your best bet is going to be to apply for income-based repayment. So the income-based repayment plan for most people will reduce their payment um, versus the traditional repayment plan, especially if you have a low income um, comparatively to your debt. So that would allow you to also cure a delinquency. You can also apply for loan forgiveness. There are different loan forgiveness programs that will cancel or forgive your student loans. Forgiveness, cancellation, discharge really essentially mean the same thing. They basically mean you don't have to pay your loans back. Okay, right now most people are talking about public service loan forgiveness. It's the most common way to have your student loans forgiven. Um, it's after 10 years of working for a qualifying employer, you would be eligible to have the remainder of your balance of your loans forgiven. There are other kinds of forgiveness, income driven repayment forgiveness, disability discharges, teacher forgiveness. There is a way to get your loans discharged in bankruptcy. If someone passes away, the borrower passes away, or the parent, if it's a parent plus loan. School closing or falsifying information and identity theft are kind of very specific situations. So if you have those scenarios, you might want to reach out to someone like VLP or another EdCap provider to really discuss that idea, because those are something you have to move forward with a little bit differently. So there are some, like I told you, there were some different forgiveness programs that kind of just laid them out for you here. The one that most people, like I said, talk about is public service loan forgiveness. And the reason why most people talk about that is the one that is being given out the most. That is the one that right now most people who are getting forgiveness are doing it through that program. You work 10 years for a nonprofit with an income driven repayment plan for 30 hours a week. And you make payments on your loan during that time, you will get forgiveness. If you work part time for two providers and it adds up to 30 hours a week for a nonprofit or government employer, that can also qualify you to certify for that period for PSLF. So there's a lot of different ways to put PSLF together to get public service loan forgiveness. There are provisions for income driven repayment forgiveness for 20 to 25 years right now. Um, some people are getting forgiveness under that because they have older loans, like, from back in the late 90s and early 90s, and those loans are getting forgiven as well under the income driven forgiveness plan. Borrower defense to repayment means that if you file, you can have your loans discharged if you were defrauded by your higher education institution. Those are really highly publicized, like the Cardona decision, and that really relies upon the school having committed misconduct. There's also a provision if you are totally and permanently disabled. you can actually qualify for student loan discharge based upon that categorization of you being totally and permanently disabled. That means you can't work enough to support yourself. You get SSD. You are considered, permanently disabled by some form of governmental services, like, or you get a veteran, or you're a veteran who was discharged from the military with a disability discharge. Those are provisions that allow you to apply for total and permanent disability discharge. If you are a teacher in New York State or in the federal system, you can apply for teacher forgiveness. There are different provisions for application or for forgiveness based upon working for 5 years. There are some programs that will give you forgiveness for every year. They'll give you a certain amount of money every year towards forgiveness. New York State has a Get on Your Feet loan forgiveness program that'll pay someone's student loan payments for the first 2 years if they graduate from New York State school. And then, there's the bankruptcy idea of bankruptcy, which is something that is increasingly becoming common for people to be able to successfully discharge through bankruptcy. And then there's discharges upon death. So if someone passes away, a Parent Plus loan borrower or something like that, those loans do get discharged. So, there are lots of different ways to avoid default. So your best bet as a student loan borrower is to try to avoid default if at all possible. However, if you've already defaulted, there is help. There are ways to get your loans out of default. Rehabilitating your loans and consolidating your loans are the primary ways that most people use to get their loans back into good standing. So you might say to yourself, well, what does that mean? Well, rehabilitating your loans is a very specific thing. It means that you agree in writing to make 9 voluntary, reasonable, and affordable monthly payments within 20 days of the due date, and you make all 9 payments during a period of 10 consecutive months. What that means is you make basically 9 payments in a row. And you have to make them within 20 days of the due date. So you can't be 21 days late 1 month, because that will remove you from the rehabilitation process. If you, you can do it during 10 months. So I think you can actually miss one, but then you're going to leave the rehabilitation process if you miss more than one. So this is a very specific process. And the beauty of this particular program is that a reasonable amount under this program is different than a reasonable amount under other programs. So really, a reasonable amount here means that you are going to be, you get 10 or 15% of your income, your discretionary income, not your whole income, but your discretionary income. They will divide it by 12, and then they will give you a calculated amount that will give you a payment. It's probably cheaper than an IDR payment. You will, in all likelihood, have to provide documentation of income to your loan holder. In most direct loans, the U.S. Department of Education is your loan holder. So this is a reasonable monthly payment amount is not the same as an income-driven repayment amount. So it's actually different. So what does that mean? Well, if you're rehabilitating an ed-held loan, which means a loan that's held by the Department of Education, right? The borrower has to mail a copy of their latest tax return or tax transcript to the Department of Education at a specific address. When the Department of Education receives your income and expense information, they will then send you a loan rehabilitation agreement in the mail. The agreement will include your calculated monthly payments, your payment options, and the terms of the agreement. So after receiving that, you need to make 9 on-time monthly payments to complete the loan rehabilitation program. They have to be made within 20 days, as we talked about, of the due date. And after your 9th rehabilitation program payment, the Education Department will send a request to the credit reporting agencies who will completely remove the record of default from your account. That's the beautiful thing with rehabilitation, is it actually takes that record of default right off of your loan. So you actually go back into good standing with those loans. So it's a nice way of actually pulling your loans and kind of refreshing them. Um, the thing about, rehabilitating your loans, and that thing that I always tell people is, unfortunately, you can only rehabilitate a defaulted loan one time, unless you did it before 2008 or during the COVID payment process. So there's a little bit of kind of leeway there, but generally the rule is you can only rehabilitate a defaulted loan once. So if you went through the rehabilitation program, made all 9 payments, moved on with your loans, fall into default again, the only option that will be available for you going after that point is this. You can only go ahead with consolidation. So you might say to yourself, well, what if I can't afford that? What if I can't afford the payment that they're telling me? Well, then you call the Department of Ed and you ask your loan holder to calculate an alternative monthly payment amount based on the amount of your monthly income um, after your expenses have been subtracted. You have to provide that documentation of your monthly income and expenses. There's a form called the Loan Rehabilitation Information Form. You provide that to your servicer, your loan holder, and then they will calculate an alternative payment amount, which probably will be lower than the payment amount you were originally offered. There's no guarantee of that, but it's likely. So, and then after that's done, you have to choose either the first payment option or the second payment option and make one of those to go forward with the rehabilitation process. All right. So during rehabilitation, unfortunately, collections can still continue during the rehabilitation process. Um, if there's a garnishment or a treasury offset, um, even after you begin making those voluntary payments under the rehabilitation agreement, they will continue collecting that, but they don't count towards the 9 voluntary repayment plans, program payments. Involuntary payments can continue to be taken until you have made 5 of your rehabilitation payments. So if you're getting garnished through your wages, unfortunately, until all 5 of your rehabilitation payments have been made, you will not be able to stop that garnishment. But once you've made the 9 required payments, your loans will no longer be in default. All of that garnishment and all of your tax offset will go away. But if you don't complete the rehabilitation, collection efforts resume and your wage garnishment will be just reinstated. It's not something where they have to make a court motion or anything like that to reinstate it. They can just go ahead and reinstate that wage garnishment. So there are good and bad things about loan rehabilitation. The benefits are that the defaulted status is removed from your loan and collection through the wage garnishment garnishment or treasury offset can stop. You're going to go back into being eligible for things that you were previously not, like deferments, forbearances, choices of repayment plans, loan forgiveness, all of that stuff. If you're in default, PSLF, you cannot apply for PSLF if you're in default. You can't apply for income-driven loan repayment if you're in default. You'll also be eligible again to receive federal student aid. The record of default on your rehabilitated loan will be removed from your credit history. It might show some late payments, but it's not going to show that default, which is going to be a big bonus for your credit report. However, there are negatives. You can only do the rehabilitation once. It takes a long time compared to the next option. It takes up to a year, and a lot of people don't complete the rehabilitation process. And that's not, anything on those people. It's just there's a reason why people fall into default as far as financial situations, and they can oftentimes not afford the payment that they originally quoted, and they can't afford the payment that the rehabilitated loan amount as well. It could be more expensive than consolidation for that reasoning. All right. So there's another option, which is consolidating your loans. If you consolidate your loans, it's, as we talked about before, it takes your previous loans, shows them as paid in full, and creates a new federal loan. That's like a brand new loan. But to do this, you have to either agree to pay the new direct consolidation loan under an income-driven repayment plan, or you have to make 3 consecutive voluntary, on-time, full monthly payments on the defaulted loan before you can consolidate it. So, the loan holder will determine the amount that would have to be paid for you to be able to do the 3 consecutive on-time full monthly payments. It can't be more than what's considered reasonable and affordable based on your finances, but those would allow, if you make those 3 on-time payments, then you would be allowed to consolidate the loan and not have to be on an income-based repayment plan. However, um, for most people who are in default, going onto an income-driven repayment plan is not a negative thing because it would actually scale their payments down to match their income. When you consolidate a loan, your accrued interest gets added to the principal balance. It could cause you over time to have to pay more, but the bonus is it would get you out of default. Um, you know, the, the downside of it is also that this does not remove that delinquency from your credit report, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But it still reflects on your credit report that you were previously delinquent on that loan. It's just that that loan is no longer open; it shows closed. All right, so consolidating direct versus FFEL loans. So FFEL loans are Family First Education loans. They were from a long time ago. They're not something that's currently offered. Um, in order to consolidate a defaulted direct consolidation loan, you have to have one other eligible loan in the consolidation. So you can't just default. You can't consolidate just one defaulted direct loan. Um, if you don't have any other eligible loans that it can be included in the consolidation, you can't use this consolidation option. You can only do repayment in full or loan rehabilitation. However, if you have a defaulted FFEL consolidation loan without any new loans, you can go ahead and apply for a consolidation loan under an IDR plan and consolidate that loan because FFEL loans, the government is trying to phase those out, and so they would be rolling that FFEL loan into a new direct loan. If you can include at least one other eligible loan in the consolidation, you're eligible to reconsolidate a defaulted FFEL consolidation loan. Um, you know, if you meet any of the other two requirements described above. So, you know, FFEL loans have to be viewed a little bit differently than consolidating direct loans just for these particular reasons. Okay, so wage garnishment. If you want to consolidate a defaulted loan that is being collected through garnishment of your wages, that is being collected in accordance with a court order after a judgment was obtained against you, you cannot consolidate the order or the loan unless the wage garnishment order has been lifted or the judgment has been vacated. So if your lender has gone forward and obtained a judgment to collect on your student loans and you are currently being garnished, you cannot consolidate that loan until that wage garnishment is lifted or you've moved to vacate the judgment. And you would do that in whatever court the judgment was originally placed in. That is something that VLP could assist you with if you're having that issue. So definitely feel free to reach out to us if you are being garnished and want to consolidate your loan, because we would have to work to lift that garnishment before we can move forward with that. So as we talked about with remediation, there are some benefits and some negatives to consolidations. So the benefit of consolidation is once you consolidate, your loan can be deferred, forbeared, and you'll be eligible for loan forgiveness again. You can receive additional federal student aid. You can get cheaper repayment plans. And this is a relatively quick process versus rehabilitation. It only takes 2 to 3 months for consolidation to go through. Doesn't cost you anything to do that, and you can enroll in an IDR plan right then, so that you would roll forward with a lower payment theoretically. The negatives is that consolidation of a defaulted loan does not remove the record of the default from the credit history. Unlike rehabilitation, this does not refresh the old loan. It basically just closes out the old loan and gives you a new loan. The unpaid interest capitalizes, and you may lose accumulated credit for IDR forgiveness if you are worried about that. So really, if you're looking for something like PSLF or anything like that, forgiveness, it really doesn't matter if you capitalize the interest. because if you're not moving to pay the debt off, then it's not really that big of a deal. All right. So there's one other option that people don't really talk that much about, but if you pay the amount of your defaulted student loan in full, that will remove them from default. And it does reflect on your credit report that they were removed from default and paid in full. That's not the option for a lot of people, but occasionally it's a small loan that a person can move forward with getting out of default. So, we generally, this is not the best option for most people, but it is an available option. So, you might think to yourself, well, why can't I just avoid this whole thing? Like, if I just ignore my student loans, won't they just eventually go away? Like, sometimes if you ignore certain debts, they will go away. Unfortunately, this is a federal debt, and most student loans are owed to the federal government, and the consequences of ignoring them are pretty severe. So I always urge people, don't ignore it. Let's try to figure out a way to get you out of default, avoid default, so that you can avoid some of these consequences. Being defaulted on your student loans can make it difficult to get a job that needs federal security background. You can't get federally backed mortgages like FHAs and things like that. You get wages garnished. You can be hounded by collectors. You're not eligible for future financial aid. There's a lot of penalties and fees. And unfortunately, even if you're not working right now, but when you go to collect Social Security, those Social Security payments are garnishable, which is terrible, but they are garnishable, and they're garnishable at a higher rate than for other kinds of debt. So, they can take 15%, I believe, of your Social Security towards paying back these defaulted student loans. So your best bet is to try to get out of default, if at all possible, and to try to get these loans into some sort of income-driven repayment plan. Even if you're paying in an income-driven repayment plan for 25 years, it will ultimately be better for you than going into default and having all of these consequences. So that's just our little deal about student loans and student loan default. If you are having difficulty with a defaulted loan, or you need help with a defaulted loan, please feel free to contact us. Again, my name is Pauline Smith. I work at Volunteer Lawyers Project. Our phone number this is my direct line if you would like to contact us about getting assistance with your student loans. That is my direct phone number. Our email is on there as well. You can also go to our website at vlpcny.org, and that is another way you can contact us to get assistance with your loans. If you have any questions or need information, my email is also psmith@vlpcny.org, and that's another good way to contact us regarding your question. So with that, we're going to leave you for tonight with all this information on default and delinquency and student loans. And please do feel free to contact us if you need help. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.